Right, we'd very much like to welcome Nicola. Thank you very much for joining us today. Nicola is an award-winning journalist and has been working very closely with Belgium Campus for the last while. I've been working with her quite closely as well on quite a few different articles and publications. Some of the knowledge that she has to share has definitely been a great eye-opener in terms of, how connected IT and the tech industry really are to, everyday life, and seeing how she tells stories is really what I'm hoping we can extract from her today. Nicola, I think considering your background and where you've come from, I think something I've really gotten to enjoy about our conversations the last while is how dynamic your brain works. So considering that your career bridges across technology and journalism and communication and, all these different aspects and different industries, what is the current narrative that you're seeing about women in careers that specifically span around economics, technology, engineering, mining, the different STEM industries, if I can call it that, and then any other sectors that traditionally are seen as dominated by men?
Jackie, thank you so very much for having me today. First, just to say, I outsource my tax and my bookkeeping. I'm sitting here and I'm looking at a room full of, and there's 64 people in this meeting. So it's literally a large room full of powerful women, and yet I don't hear any of your voices outside of this meeting. And that, I think, goes back to some of what Tracy was saying in terms of, storytelling as well as imposter syndrome. I mean, when I look for expert commentary for articles, for example, and that's across most men field, from economics to ICT, other sectors like engineering, it's very often men's voices are found. And when I say voices, I mean people who I can quote. Poor Jackie's become a bit of a go-to, and she gets these messages at like 6 o'clock. I'm doing an article on XYZ. Find me somebody. Find me a human. And that's because we need those voices very, very quickly. And I was saying to one of my editors the other day, the personal finance editor, that there is such a limited pool of people. And because we need these voices so very quickly, it's the people I can reach out to immediately. And I look at economics, for example, because I do quite a lot of economics writing. And apart from Investec, there aren't that many women's voices that come through. I mean, those guys will put out a very quick note, which actually I need to translate into something useful quite often. But it's quite late. So generally speaking, I will pop a note through to an economist I know on WhatsApp who will respond. He'll leave me a voice note. Important. He'll leave me a voice note. I dump it into TurboScribe. I stick it in the article. Done deal. It's incredibly easy to get comment off him. And that's a big thing, is that we don't have voices. We do have voices when it's a big announcement like interest rates or tariffs or something like that. Then the voices automatically will arrive. But to go and specifically hunt for women voices when you are on a ridiculous deadline. I mean, by 10:15 this morning, I'd filed 4 stories and had already started on reworking an op-ed. So, the deadlines are hectic. It's difficult. And it's not really this room proves it. It's not the lack of voices. You each have your own voices. They're here. I can hear them. You guys know what you're talking about. It's just that you're not being heard. And if we look at whether this is the lived reality, and coming back to that, it's like Tracy was saying about storytelling. We've got to tell our stories. We can't have this imposter syndrome thing. That's why, and you were saying, Tracy, you don't know everything about everything. Just ask somebody else. So if I'm asked to speak on a topic that I've written about, I've already asked the experts. So I know the stuff. So I will happily, if somebody says go on TV, I'm like, no worries, absolutely, with pleasure. Because that builds my profile. And that's a big issue in communications, is that we don't build profiles. So we don't get out there. And it's not the lived reality. That's not a simple yes or no. And the important thing to me is, in terms of that yes or no, is the IT role models. You guys are IT role models. Every single person in this room is pretty much an IT role model. But you aren't seen. And that's something Jackie and I were talking about the other day. And we need to be seen. In particular, you guys need to be seen. I did a quick whip around my kid and some of her friends. And a lot of them came back and said, no, there aren't enough women's role models. I think it was something like 90% said that there aren't enough, or 80%. It was high, said there aren't enough. So we need to change this narrative. And we need to make sure our voices aren't just heard during Women's Month, when journalists go and PRs go, it's Women's Month, easy, let's get it out there. No, why am I not quoting you for the rest of the year? So if you guys get a message from Jackie going, Nikki is looking for this comment, that's why. I need your voices. And, that's what we do, is we build a profile, we tell stories, like Tracy said, from a media point of view. That means just putting your name out there, If you've got a good idea about an opinion that you'd like to put out there, maybe partner with a writer, but get it out there. Business Brief will run almost anything as long as it's exclusive. And even better, they put your contact details in. So I do that quite often, just to get like my PR stuff out there, because I straddle photography, PR, and quite a few other bits and bobs. Redesigning my profile into a fairly niche thing. So that's quite a lot of info to take in. But the long and short of it is, we need to hear from you, because you need to be role models for women so that we can have more women in IT. And the only way you can do that is by speaking up, is by storytelling, but in the media. Now, I don't recommend just running off and doing this. Jackie knows that. She sent me a great quote the other day with a swear word in it. I was like, and I can't use this. But because I do PR for Jackie on the other flip side as well, I will send her quotes back. And I'll be like, okay, I rewrote this diplomatically. Are you happy with it? And then she left me a voice note yesterday where I had to read between the lines. I was like, I don't understand what this chick is trying to tell me. Wait. Okay, I think I've got it. Let me send it back. And I do that. And I don't do that for other people, because those guys are commentators and they already know how to speak to the media. I interviewed Philip Tobias when I was a very junior, an intern at Mail and Guardian. And he very kindly spoke exceptionally slowly. So that, and back then, I was handwriting my notes, right? Now today I record them, but back then I had notepads, proper ones for journalists, like in the movies. And he spoke slowly so that I would understand. So that's just what we need to do. Simple as. And I hope that all makes some sort of linear sense.
I think to some degree it does. I think something that has definitely stood out for me, and I think it's something that has been interesting, because I think traditionally women aren't great at it, is, feeling comfortable enough to stand up and say, this is my profile, this is who I am, let me build it, let me put myself out there. And I think that is definitely a narrative that you've now, raised, Nicola, and I think working with you the last while has definitely helped me understand some of that. The way that you've raised that the narrative out there isn't always the way that it seems, has definitely been, a very big eye-opener. So I'm going to ask you the follow-up questions to the next set of questions that we're going to set off with, and it'll probably be the last round. But this narrative seems to be a very big problem for us. So how can we change this narrative that in a way that we can actually properly represent what the actual picture looks like in the media? I hear what you're saying, let's include more people, let's start with some of the people we know, some of the women that we look up to, but how can we help students, learn how to tell their stories better, how to communicate better, and how to actually influence change, not only in technology, but, above and beyond, because like I said earlier, technology is something we use as a tool to drive impact and change. So, like, how do we build out our skills in storytelling and communication to do exactly that? How do we specifically ensure that we can, we ensure that the media representation of things like Women's Month aren't only restricted to, Women's Month? How do we make it a longer initiative? Because I know we've got quite a few people on the call who share that exact same sentiment, that it shouldn't just be limited to a day or a month. Sorry, I know it's a lot packed into the question, but as always, you can read my mind.
So I'm going to take a step back and refer to an economist again, because I write a lot of economic stories. I can't tell you where the rand is trading at right now. I haven't looked at it today, but normally I can. And normally I can tell you where oil is and gold and all of that. But for example, there's one particular PR who I'll often need, again, quick comment, I'm doing an article, I just need a line or two. And if she can, she will direct that question to a female economist. And that could be because she's female. And her and I both are on the same page. It's actually a PR who I work for as well. And there's got to be a lot of Chinese walling and disclosing of potential conflicts of interest and transparency in my life. But that's one way of doing it, is that you specifically target comment from a woman. But then how do you get to that point is what I think Jackie was trying to ask.
Yes, how do we build storytellers?
How do you get there? And it's not that easy. It really isn't to get into the media. You need to make connections. You need to network. You need to, X isn't as useful as it used to be, but you need to start by forming opinions or having an expert thought that you can put out there. And ideally, and this is blowing my own horn, I would recommend that you hook up or join forces with, because hook up sounds a bit dodgy, join forces with somebody who does what I do. I know the media, I have the contacts, I can put people forward and say, hey, would you consider this op-ed? It was written by so-and-so and it's on XYZ. And if you come to me with, I've got this great idea for op-ed and it's on the use of AI in business, I'm going to shut you right down, because if I hear that one more time, it's ridiculous now. We've had that to death. And I get clients wanting me to write that and I'm like, dude, this is the umpteenth thing we've seen coming through. And I promise if you send it to a news editor, it is just going to get deleted. Even if you send it to the catch-all email, which is the worst thing you can do, it's going to get deleted. You need to have those contacts and you need to do the targeting right as well. When I was at IOL the first time around, I was managing the website. My sole task was to grow the numbers. And I tripled them in 8 months. Very proud of me. And we would get press releases in about how to help your dog in the hot weather. And I'm like, it's a business website. Please, will you explain to me how this is relevant? Please. I didn't go back to the PR and say that because I'm too busy to go back to you. I don't have time. I just delete. And we've got to be valid in today's world. So you've got to get out there. You've got to have the contacts. And we've got to be valid and on point with what is happening. What is happening out there? What's the news? How can you build on that? And often you'll need somebody like me. Maybe you don't. Maybe there's an event happening on campus or in your office. Or Suzette, you've got a great team as it is. I know your team. When I was in PR, we had the ABSA account. I know your team. So, if there's an event and you're invited to it, and there's a journo, make a point of going up, introducing yourself, engaging them. Don't be all stiff and formal. Hey, this is what I do. My name is so-and-so. Let's grab a coffee sometime. Journalists might not always have the time for a cup of coffee. It's more the B2B, business to business or weeklies that do. Start there. That's fine. And please don't, unless you have a good relationship, don't ask if you can see your comments back. Unless it's very technical, because what a lot of people do is they ask for their comments back, and I've been burnt, where I've had people completely rewrite it so that it is not what they said at all. And I'm like, well, I've got no obligation to do that. So unless it's a very technical thing and you just want to literally fact check and make it clear that you understand that point, and it's that sort of relationship building. Okay, I know, for example, that if I need to send something back to somebody, they will fact check it to make sure I haven't made a mistake. Tracy, it's what you were saying about I know a lot of people who know a lot of people who know stuff. So that I can't then make a mistake. If I get stuck, I will reach out to somebody. So be that person that can explain. Why? Because then I'm going to pick up the phone to you again. Especially if you're available. I know we're not always available. It's quick sticks. It's 5 minutes out of your day, really. And you get the reward comes further down. And there's an important point I want to make, which is that it's not just raising your voices in the media. Media are a channel to a broader stakeholder group. People who own businesses, who hire companies who outsource the procurement managers, whatever the procurement officers, they read publications. So you've got to get your voice out in a targeted publication. If you're an expert in mining, it's really rather pointless being quoted in You magazine if that is your target. It's the same as trying to sell a Ferrari through You magazine. Not going to work. So I think that's a very roundabout conversation, but it's really just all about taking the opportunities when they come along, get your voice out there, and not necessarily make friends with the journos, but be available. I mean, look, I am friends with a lot of my contacts. It's just I collect people. But be available and also accessible, because sometimes the language the journos are dealing with, or sometimes the concept that they're dealing with will be complicated. Explain it in what I call English. Not accounting speak, not lawyer speak, English. So, yeah, those will be my tips.